The interesting things about presidential elections is the quality of the candidates. That's basically saying that because they're running for the highest office, they're usually pretty well known. Now, typically, they are what political scientists would call quality candidates. A quality candidate is just someone who's run for office and held office before. Why does that make them a quality candidate? Well, for a couple reasons. The first is if they've run for office before, we know they know how to run for office and win an election, right? They must be a pretty quality candidate if they've won an election before. We also know that they've been vetted by the press. So reason two is that they're considered quality is because if they've run before, they've had to deal with the press before. The press has looked into their background and vetted them, as we often say. So there's probably not going to be any big secrets and revelations that come out about a candidate who's already run for and won office when they run again. And finally, the third reason is that if they've held political office before, they're probably pretty well known because we tend to know who represents us. We know that's not always the case, especially if it's like state assembly. Probably don't know your state assembly person. But you probably know the mayor of New York and the governor of New York. You also may know your House member, and you likely know at least one of the senators for our state. So, with that in mind, the sort of bigger office that they hold, the more likely they are to have name recognition. Plus, they've already run for office, so they've been around, and we've probably heard their name in passing, at the very least from campaign ads for their past campaign. So those are the three reasons why we consider candidates who have run for office already quality candidates. Held office already, quality candidates. Now, candidates who run for presidency typically have held office already. It's rare to not have someone who's been held a elected office before. Now, that's not always the case, right? We know Donald Trump was not in an elected office before he became president, but he was really well known already, right? We knew a lot about him before he started running. So that gave him a leg up over other non-quality candidates. Now, in the case of presidency, oftentimes the last position they will have held is an executive office position, so mayor or governor, rather than a legislative position like House or Senate. Now, again, that's not always the case. In fact, back when McCain was running against Biden, not Biden, Obama, McCain was running against Obama, both of them were serving in the Senate at the time. So that was the first election since Kennedy was elected that we would be guaranteed someone coming out of the Senate going right into the presidency. But that was, since Kennedy was elected. So there'd been a pretty long chunk between Kennedy and Obama ultimately winning. So we can see that we tend to have people coming out of executive positions, again, governor, mayor, sometimes vice president, rather than out of legislature. That doesn't mean that they didn't serve in the legislature at one point. It just means they don't come directly from legislative positions. Again, typically, this is not a rule. This is just a common thing. So because candidates tend to be very high quality, have held offices already, and because even if they aren't considered quality, they are generally very well known, we get a lot of attention on our presidential elections, right? We're just more likely to pay attention to it if we know who's running. If you have no idea who anyone is, how interested are you ever going to get? If you know the people, if you've heard these names a lot, you're going to be more likely to pay attention. So we can see that the quality of the candidate means that we're going to focus a lot more on presidential elections than elections for lower office.